Commander Marcus Kane stood in the observation deck of the mining station, watching the twin suns of Kepler 442 cast orange shadows across the asteroid field. His weathered hands gripped the railing as he studied the readouts on his tablet. The numbers didn't lie. Humanity's expansion into this sector had been nothing short of miraculous. In just 50 years, they had transformed barren rocks into thriving industrial hubs. Behind him, the hiss of pneumatic doors announced someone's arrival. Marcus didn't need to turn around to know who it was. The heavy footsteps and labored breathing belonged to Admiral Harrison Kane, his father and the commanding officer of the entire Outer Rim Defense Fleet. Marcus. The older man's voice carried the weight of authority that had commanded respect across 3 star systems. The Council has made their decision. Marcus finally turned, meeting his father's steely gray eyes. Admiral Kane stood in full military regalia, his chest decorated with medals from a dozen campaigns against alien raiders. The man who had single-handedly orchestrated humanity's greatest victories now looked tired, almost defeated. "Let me guess," Marcus said, his voice bitter. "Operation Cleansing Fire gets the green light." Admiral Kane nodded slowly. "The Zephyrian territories will be sterilized within 72 hours. Every settlement, every outpost, every living creature in their space will be eliminated." The words hung in the air like poison. Marcus had read the classified reports about the Zephyrians, a peaceful species of crystalline beings who had made contact with humanity just 6 months ago. Their technology was primitive compared to human standards, but their homeworlds contained massive deposits of quantum crystals essential for faster-than-light travel. "They're not hostile, Father," Marcus said, his voice rising. "They've done nothing to threaten us. They even offered to trade peacefully." "They're in the way," Admiral Kane replied coldly. "The Council has determined that their continued existence poses a potential threat to human expansion. We cannot allow any species to develop technology that might challenge our dominance." Marcus stared at his father in disbelief. This was the man who had taught him about honor, about protecting the innocent, about the responsibility that came with power. Now that same man was preparing to commit genocide against beings whose only crime was existing in space that humans wanted. "I won't be part of this," Marcus declared. "I am submitting my resignation." Admiral Kane's expression hardened. "You will do no such thing. You have a duty to humanity, to your species. Personal feelings don't matter when the survival of our race is at stake." "Survival?" Marcus laughed bitterly. "We're the most powerful military force in this galaxy. We have weapons that can crack planets and shields that can deflect stellar radiation. How exactly are the Zephyrians threatening our survival?" "Because they exist," his father said simply. "Because as long as there are other intelligent species in this universe, there will always be the possibility of conflict. The only way to ensure permanent peace is to ensure we're the only ones left to enjoy it." The casual way his father spoke about exterminating an entire species made Marcus's blood run cold. This wasn't the man who had raised him, who had told him bedtime stories about human heroes who protected the weak and stood up for what was right. "What happened to you?" Marcus asked quietly. "When did you become a monster?" Admiral Kane's face remained impassive. "I became realistic. I learned that in this universe there are only predators and prey. Humans have spent millennia being prey to disease, natural disasters, and our own violent nature. Now we finally have the chance to be the apex predator, to take our rightful place as masters of the galaxy." Marcus shook his head. "This isn't mastery. This is madness. This is evolution," his father corrected. "And you will participate or you will be court-martialed for treason." The threat was clear. Marcus looked at his father, really looked at him, and saw a stranger wearing a familiar face. The warm eyes that had once comforted him after nightmares were now cold and calculating. The hands that had taught him to throw a baseball were now steady enough to sign death warrants for billions of innocent beings. "I have a choice to make," Marcus said slowly. "No," Admiral Kane replied. "You have orders to follow." Marcus reached into his jacket and withdrew his service pistol. His father's eyes widened slightly, but he didn't move. For a moment, father and son stared at each other across a chasm that could never be bridged. "I'm sorry," Marcus whispered, and pulled the trigger. The energy blast struck Admiral Kane in the chest, sending him stumbling backward. He looked down at the smoking hole in his uniform with something that might have been surprise, then back up at his son with what might have been pride. "You always were." "Too soft," he gasped, blood frothing at his lips. "They'll come for you now. The fleet, the council. They won't stop until..." Admiral Kane collapsed, his eyes staring sightlessly at the ceiling. Marcus holstered his weapon and activated his communicator. "This is Commander Kane," he said, his voice steady despite the enormity of what he had just done. "Admiral Kane is dead. I killed him to prevent the genocide of the Zephyrian people. I'm declaring myself in rebellion against the Earth Council and taking command of all forces loyal to basic human decency." The response was immediate chaos. Alarms began blaring throughout the station as security forces mobilized. Marcus had maybe 10 minutes before they breached the observation deck. But 10 minutes was all he needed to send a coded message to his son David, currently commanding a patrol vessel on the far side of the system. In that message was everything: the location of the Zephyrian homeworlds, the timetable for Operation Cleansing Fire, and most importantly, the access codes to humanity's most devastating weapon. Marcus smiled grimly as he heard the security forces gathering outside. He had set events in motion that would either save the galaxy or destroy it. Either way, the age of human supremacy was about to end. Captain David Kane stared at the encrypted message that had just arrived on his personal communicator. His hands trembled as he read it for the third time, unable to fully process what his father had done. Admiral Harrison Kane, the most decorated officer in human history, was dead, killed by his own son to prevent an act of genocide. David's patrol ship, the Prometheus, drifted in the shadow of a massive gas giant while he tried to make sense of the situation. His crew of 12 was busy with routine maintenance, unaware that their captain had just learned his grandfather was dead and his father was now a wanted fugitive. The bridge communication system crackled to life. "Captain Kane, this is Fleet Command. You are ordered to report to Station Omega immediately for reassignment." David recognized the voice of Admiral Chen, his grandfather's second in command and a man who had never shown mercy to anyone who stood in his way. The reassignment was a trap. They planned to use David as leverage against his father or simply eliminate him as a potential threat. "Acknowledged. Fleet Command," David replied, his voice betraying none of his inner turmoil. "ETA to Station Omega is 6 hours. He cut the communication and sat back in his command chair, studying the tactical display. The Zephyrian homeworld of Crystalline Prime appeared as a blue dot on the edge of human space, peaceful and unsuspecting. According to his father's message, the attack fleet would reach their territory in 68 hours. Lieutenant Sarah Morgan, his second in command, approached his chair. She was young, ambitious, and completely loyal to Earth Council doctrine. "Sir, should I plot a course for Station Omega?" David looked at her earnest face and felt a pang of regret for what he was about to do. "Actually, Lieutenant, I need to show you something first. Come with me to my quarters." In the privacy of his cabin, David activated a security scrambler and showed Sarah the message from his father. Her expression shifted from confusion to horror to anger as she read about Operation Cleansing Fire. "This has to be fake," she said finally. "The Council would never authorize genocide. Your father must have been compromised somehow." David shook his head. "I've seen the intelligence reports, Sarah. The Council has been planning this for months. The Zephyrians have something we want, and we're going to take it by force." Sarah's hand moved instinctively toward her sidearm. "Sir, I think you need to report to medical. This kind of paranoid thinking could be a sign of neural degradation from long-range patrol duty." "I'm not paranoid," David said quietly. "I'm horrified, and I'm not going to let this happen." The young lieutenant drew her weapon in one smooth motion, training it on her captain. "Sir, I'm placing you under arrest for suspected treason and psychological breakdown. Please surrender your sidearm and submit to medical evaluation." David sighed. He had hoped she would understand, but he had prepared for this possibility. "I'm sorry, Sarah, I really am." The neural disruptor he had concealed in his jacket emitted a brief pulse of energy. Lieutenant Morgan collapsed immediately, unconscious but unharmed. David caught her before she hit the floor and gently laid her on his bunk. He activated the ship's internal communication system. "All crew, this is the captain. Report to the mess hall immediately for an emergency briefing." Within minutes, the 11 remaining crew members had assembled in the ship's small dining area. They ranged in age from 19 to 45, representing the best and brightest of humanity's space navy. David looked at each face and wondered how many would follow him into what was essentially mutiny against their own species. "I've just received intelligence that changes everything," he began. "In approximately 68 hours, The Earth Council is going to launch an unprovoked attack against the Zephyrian civilization. This isn't a military operation against hostiles. It's genocide against a peaceful species whose only crime is occupying space that we want. The reaction was immediate. Some crew members looked shocked, others confused. A few appeared skeptical. Ensign Rodriguez, barely out of the academy, raised his hand. "Sir, even if that's true, what can we do about it? We're just one patrol ship." David smiled grimly. "We're going to do what humans do best when faced with an impossible situation. We're going to find a way to win anyway." He activated the wall display, showing a schematic of the human fleet's most closely guarded secret. "This is Project Ragnarok, a weapon designed to sterilize entire star systems. The Council plans to use it against the Zephyrians as a demonstration of human power." Chief Petty Officer Williams, a veteran of the Centauri Wars, leaned forward. "Captain, that weapon is stored in the most secure facility in human space. Even if we wanted to stop them, we'd never get close enough." "Actually, we would," David said, producing a small data chip. "This contains my grandfather's command codes. Admiral Kane had override authority for all military operations, including access to Ragnarok." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. They weren't just talking about desertion or disobedience. They were talking about stealing humanity's most powerful weapon and turning it against their own people. "Sir," Ensign Park spoke up, her voice barely above a whisper. "Are you suggesting we commit treason?" David met her eyes steadily. "I'm suggesting we choose between our loyalty to the human government and our loyalty to human values. The Council wants us to become conquerors and murderers. I want us to remember what it means to be the species that stood up for the weak and fought against tyranny." He paused, letting his words sink in. "Anyone who wants to leave can take a shuttle to the nearest station. No questions asked, no repercussions. But anyone who stays is committing to stopping this genocide, whatever the cost." The crew exchanged glances, uncertain and afraid. Then Chief Williams stood up. "Sir, I joined the Navy to protect human civilians, not to murder alien children. Count me in." One by one, the others stood as well. Even young Ensign Rodriguez, who looked like he might be sick, eventually got to his feet. They all knew they were crossing a line from which there could be no return. "All right then," David said, feeling a mixture of pride and terror. "We're going to steal the most dangerous weapon ever created and use it to save a species we've never met. Because that's what humans do. We protect those who can't protect themselves, even if it means sacrificing everything we have." He turned to the navigation display. "Set course for the Ragnarok facility. And someone wake up, Lieutenant Morgan. We're going to need every hand for what comes next." The Ragnarok facility floated in the absolute darkness between stars, a massive cylinder of metal and death hidden in the cosmic void. No planetary system existed within 50 light-years of its location. The weapon it contained could destabilize spacetime itself, making it too dangerous to store anywhere near inhabited worlds. Captain David Kane studied the facility through the Prometheus's long-range sensors as his ship approached on minimal power. The station was enormous, 3 kilometers long and half a kilometer wide, bristling with defensive systems and protected by a garrison of 500 Marines. Getting inside would be nearly impossible for any normal ship, but David wasn't planning a normal approach. "Lieutenant Morgan," he called to his second-in-command, who had been furious when she woke up, but had gradually come around to understanding the situation. "Are you ready with the transponder codes?" Sarah nodded grimly. "The ship will read as Admiral Kane's personal transport. But sir, as soon as they realize the Admiral is dead, they'll blast us to atoms," David finished. "Which is why we need to move fast." The crew had spent the last 18 hours preparing for this moment. They had studied the facility's layout, memorized security protocols, and prepared contingencies for every possible scenario. But they all knew that success would depend as much on luck as on skill. Chief Williams spoke from his position at the tactical console. "Sir, I'm detecting 3 patrol ships in the area. They're maintaining a perimeter but not actively scanning." "Good," David said. "Maintain course and speed. Remember, we belong here." The Prometheus glided through the outer perimeter without challenge. The facility's massive bulk grew larger on the view screen as they approached the docking bay. David could see the weapon itself. Through the transparent aluminum barriers, a sleek black cylinder that looked deceptively small for something, capable of destroying entire solar systems. "Incoming transmission," Ensign Rodriguez announced, nervously. Put it through, David ordered. The face of a stern-looking commander appeared on the main screen. Transport vessel, this is Commander Hayes. Please transmit your authorization codes and purpose for this visit. David straightened in his chair and adopted his grandfather's authoritative tone. This is Admiral Kane's personal vessel carrying classified orders directly from the Earth Council. Transmitting authorization now. He nodded to Lieutenant Morgan, who sent the stolen codes. For several tense seconds, nothing happened. Then Commander Hayes nodded. Authorization confirmed, Admiral's transport. You are cleared for docking Bay 7. Welcome to Ragnarok Station. The connection closed, and David let out a breath he didn't realize he had been holding. Phase 1 complete. Now comes the hard part. As the Prometheus settled into the docking bay, David gathered his crew for final instructions. Remember, we're here on a routine inspection. Act casual but purposeful. Ensign Park and Chief Williams, you're with me to the Weapon Control Center. Everyone else find an excuse to spread out through the station. When I give the signal, we take control simultaneously. The docking bay was busy with technicians and Marines going about their normal duties. David and his team walked confidently through the facility, their uniforms and authoritative manner preventing anyone from questioning their presence. The Weapon Control Center was located deep within the station's core, protected by multiple security checkpoints. At each checkpoint, David presented his grandfather's codes and maintained the fiction that he was conducting a routine inspection. The guards, accustomed to high-ranking officers arriving unexpectedly, waved them through without incident. The control center itself was a cathedral of technology. Banks of quantum computers surrounded a central holographic display showing the weapon's status. Only 6 technicians were on duty, monitoring the systems that kept humanity's ultimate weapon in perfect working order. Gentlemen, David announced as he entered, I need to run a full diagnostic on the Ragnarok system. Please step away from your consoles. The lead technician, a middle-aged man with tired eyes, looked confused. Sir, we weren't notified of any scheduled diagnostics, and Admiral Kane usually sends advance notice for inspections. David's hand moved slowly toward his sidearm. Consider this advance notice. Now please step back. The technician's eyes narrowed as he studied David's face more carefully. Wait a minute. You look like Admiral Kane, but you're too young, and your uniform insignia is wrong for an admiral. The moment of deception was over. David drew his weapon in one smooth motion, while Chief Williams and Ensign Park covered the other technicians. Nobody move. This facility is now under new management. The lead technician backed away slowly, his hands raised. You're Marcus Kane's son, aren't you? The one who killed Admiral Kane. My father saved the galaxy by killing his father, David replied. And now I'm going to finish what he started. He activated his communicator. All teams execute. Throughout the station, David's crew began taking control of critical systems. Ensign Rodriguez seized the communication center, cutting off external transmissions. Petty Officer Johnson took over life support, ensuring they could threaten the entire crew if necessary. The plan was proceeding perfectly. Then the alarms started blaring. Sir, Chief Williams shouted over the noise. Marine security teams are mobilizing. Someone must have triggered a silent alarm. David moved to the weapon control console, his fingers flying over the complex interface. He inserted the data chip containing his grandfather's command codes and began the activation sequence for Project Ragnarok. The massive weapon began powering up, its quantum cores charging with enough energy to tear holes in reality itself. Warning lights flashed throughout the control center as the system prepared for deployment. Target locked, David announced as he programmed the weapon's destination. But he wasn't targeting the Zephyrian homeworld. Instead, he was aiming at the heart of human space, at Earth itself. The lead technician gasped in horror. You can't be serious. That's our homeworld. Billions of innocent people live there. David's face was grim as he continued working. And those same innocent people are about to become complicit in genocide. Sometimes the only way to save a civilization's soul is to threaten its existence. The control room doors burst open as a squad of Marines stormed in, weapons raised. Their leader, a young sergeant, shouted commands to surrender. David looked up from the console, his hand hovering over the final activation key. Sergeant, I want you to listen very carefully. In 30 seconds, I'm going to fire this weapon at Earth unless every ship in the attack fleet heading towards Zephyrian space turns around immediately. The sergeant's face went pale. You're bluffing. No one would destroy their own homeworld. My grandfather would have exterminated an entire peaceful species without losing a moment's sleep, David replied. My father killed him to prevent it. What makes you think I wouldn't be willing to threaten Earth to save the galaxy from what we're becoming? He opened a communication channel to the entire station. This is Captain David Kane. I now control the Ragnarok weapon, and it is currently targeted at Earth. Unless Operation Cleansing Fire is cancelled immediately, and all attack forces withdraw from Zephyrian space, I will fire this weapon at our homeworld in 28 minutes. The Marines stood frozen, their weapons trained on a man who held the power to destroy everything they had ever known. In the silence that followed, everyone in the control room could hear the subtle vibration of the weapon as it continued charging toward full power. David's finger remained poised over the activation key, steady despite the magnitude of what he was threatening to do. The choice is yours, humanity. Stop being monsters or watch your homeworld burn. The Earth Council's emergency session convened in panic as David's ultimatum echoed through every communication channel in human space. 12 of the most powerful people in human civilization sat around a circular table, their faces illuminated by holographic displays showing the current positions of both the attack fleet and the Ragnarok weapon. Chancellor Morrison, a thin woman with silver hair and calculating eyes, spoke first. Confirm again, he actually has control of the weapon? General Patterson consulted his tablet. Yes, ma'am. Station diagnostics show Ragnarok is charging and locked onto Earth's coordinates. Young Kane somehow acquired Admiral Kane's override codes. And we can't regain control remotely? Morrison asked. Negative. Once the weapon begins charging, it can only be stopped from the control station itself. It's a security feature designed to prevent enemy interference. Council member Zhao leaned forward. So we have 24 minutes to decide whether to cancel the most important military operation in human history because one boy is having a tantrum. This boy controls a weapon that can crack our planet like an egg. Morrison reminded him coldly. I'd hardly call that a tantrum. The room erupted in angry voices as the council members argued. Some demanded an immediate assault on the Ragnarok facility. Others insisted they negotiate. And a few quietly suggested that perhaps canceling the genocide wasn't such a bad idea. Enough. Morrison slammed her hand on the table. We need a decision now. Do we recall the fleet or call his bluff? Admiral Chen, who had taken temporary command after Harrison Kane's death, stood slowly. His weathered face showed the strain of the last few hours. Ma'am, I knew David Kane when he was a child. His father was my best friend before he went rogue. The boy isn't bluffing. How can you be so certain? Morrison demanded. Because he's his grandfather's grandson, Chen replied. Harrison Kane once threatened to detonate an antimatter bomb in a Centauri civilian center to force their surrender. He was prepared to kill millions to achieve his objectives. David has that same ruthless determination, but he's pointing it in the opposite direction. Council Member Williams, one of the younger members, spoke up. Perhaps we should consider the possibility that he's right. The Zephyrians haven't threatened us. Do we really need to exterminate them? Morrison's eyes flashed with anger. The Zephyrians control quantum crystal deposits that could power faster than light travel for 1,000 years. If we don't take those resources, eventually they might develop the technology to use them against us. Might, Williams emphasized. We're talking about committing genocide based on what they might do in the future. General Patterson interrupted. Ma'am, we have incoming transmission from Captain Kane. David's image appeared on the central hologram, his face calm but determined. Behind him, the weapon control center hummed with deadly energy. Chancellor Morrison, I assume you've been discussing my terms. Captain Kane, Morrison replied with forced politeness. You're threatening to murder 4 billion innocent people. Surely we can reach some accommodation. The same 4 billion people who elected a government willing to commit genocide. David shot back. Tell me, Chancellor, how many of those innocent people will protest when they hear about the extinction of the Zephyrians? How many will lose sleep knowing that children died so they could have cheaper starship fuel? Morrison's composed mask slipped slightly. The Zephyrians are not human. We have a responsibility to our own species first. We have a responsibility to be better than our worst impulses, David countered. My grandfather forgot that. My father died trying to remember it. I'm willing to destroy our homeworld to preserve it. Admiral Chen stepped forward. David, this is Admiral Chen. I watched you take your first steps in your grandfather's office. I know you don't want to do this. David's expression softened slightly. Uncle Chen, you're right, I don't want to do this. But I will if I have to. You taught me that sometimes a soldier has to make impossible choices to protect what's important. Protecting humanity is what's important, Chen replied. No, David said firmly. Protecting what makes us human is what's important. The capacity for compassion, for justice, for choosing to help rather than harm. If we lose that, then we're not worth protecting. Chancellor Morrison checked her chronometer. You have 18 minutes left, Captain. What exactly do you want? Complete withdrawal of all forces from Zephyrian space. A formal apology to their government. And the dismantling of Project Ragnarok so that no one can ever use it for genocide again. Impossible, Morrison snapped. That weapon represents decades of research and trillions of credits in development. We can't simply throw it away, David smiled coldly. You can and you will, because the alternative is watching Earth become a lifeless rock floating in space. The council members exchanged desperate glances. They had built their entire political careers on the promise of human supremacy, of taking humanity's rightful place as masters of the galaxy. Now one young officer was forcing them to choose between their ambitions and their survival. What guarantee do we have that you won't fire anyway? Morrison asked. You have my word as an officer and a human being, David replied, which is apparently worth more than the word of 12 council members who were ready to exterminate an entire species without a second thought. General Patterson spoke up. Ma'am, even if we agree to his terms, how do we explain this to the public? How do we justify backing down from the greatest expansion in human history? We tell them the truth, David said, overhearing the question. We tell them that humanity chose to be protectors instead of predators. That we decided to earn our place in the galaxy through cooperation, rather than conquest. Morrison stared at the young captain's image, weighing the impossible decision. Behind David, she could see the Ragnarok weapon continuing its charge cycle, building toward the moment when it would have enough power to tear through space-time itself and reduce Earth to cosmic dust. 15 minutes. David reminded them quietly. Choose wisely, Chancellor. The future of our species depends on what you decide in the next few minutes. The hologram flickered and went dark, leaving the council members alone with the most important decision in human history. With 12 minutes remaining on David's countdown, chaos erupted across human space. Word of the standoff had leaked despite the Council's attempts at secrecy, and billions of people watched in horror as their fate hung in the balance. On Earth, massive crowds gathered in city centers, staring at public view screens that showed the countdown timer. Some demanded that the Council surrender to David's demands, while others called for military action against the terrorist threatening their homeworld. Riots broke out in major cities as humanity grappled with the reality of what their government had been planning. Admiral Chen stood before a tactical display in the council chambers, desperately searching for any option that didn't involve either genocide or the destruction of Earth. Ma'am, I have an idea. What if we send a small strike team to the Ragnarok facility? My analysis suggests they could disable the weapon before. In 12 minutes? Morrison interrupted. Against a fortified position defended by trained naval personnel? You're talking about a miracle, Admiral. Sometimes miracles are all we have left, Chen replied. Chancellor Morrison studied the faces around the table. These were the people who had led humanity to its greatest heights, colonizing dozens of worlds, building a fleet that could project power across hundreds of light years, developing technology that bordered on magic. Now they sat helpless before the moral conviction of one young officer. Status report on the attack fleet, Morrison ordered. General Patterson consulted his displays. The fleet is 4 hours from the Zephyrian border. Admiral Torres is requesting confirmation of orders. His crews are getting nervous about the situation. Morrison activated the communication system. Get me Admiral Torres immediately. The weathered face of the fleet commander appeared on the screen. Behind him, the bridge of his flagship buzzed with activity as hundreds of ships prepared for what they had been told would be the greatest victory in human history. Admiral Torres, Morrison began, what's your assessment of the current situation? Torres frowned. Ma'am, my crews are confused and demoralized. Half of them have families on Earth and they're being asked to proceed with an operation while their homeworld is threatened with destruction. Some ships are requesting permission to withdraw. And your personal opinion? Morrison pressed. Torres was quiet for a long moment. Ma'am, I've been a soldier for 30 years. I've fought pirates and raiders and hostile aliens. But I've never been asked to exterminate children who've done nothing wrong except exist in space we want. Morrison's face hardened. Admiral, you have your orders. Yes, ma'am, I do. But I also have a conscience. Torres straightened in his chair. Ma'am, I'm formally requesting clarification of our mission objectives. Are we really planning to sterilize the Zephyrian homeworld? The question hung in the air like an accusation. Morrison glanced around the table at her fellow council members, seeing doubt and fear in their faces. They had been able to plan genocide in abstract terms, discussing casualty figures and resource allocation. But confronting the reality of what they were ordering was different. 8 minutes, someone whispered. On the Ragnarok station, David watched the weapon's charge level climb toward full capacity. His crew had secured the entire facility, but they all knew their situation was hopeless. Win or lose, they would never be able to return to normal lives. They had committed themselves to stopping humanity's descent into darkness, whatever the cost. Lieutenant Morgan approached his station. Sir, incoming transmission from the Zephyrian homeworld. Put it through, David ordered. Surprised. The holographic display shimmered and resolved into the image of a crystalline being unlike anything David had ever seen. The Zephyrian stood nearly 3 meters tall, its body composed of living crystal that pulsed with inner light. When it spoke, its voice was like music. I am Resonance of Truth, speaker for the crystal minds of Zephyria. We have been monitoring your communications and we understand what transpires. David found himself momentarily speechless. The being's presence radiated a calm wisdom that made him feel like a child throwing a tantrum. Speaker, I'm trying to prevent an attack on your people. Our government plans to. We know what they plan, Resonance of Truth interrupted gently. We have seen such darkness in other species before. But you must not destroy your homeworld to save ours. I won't let them commit genocide, David said firmly, and we honor you for that conviction. But destroying Earth will not save the galaxy from humanity's capacity for evil. It will only ensure that evil spreads unchecked among the stars. David stared at the alien being. Then what do you suggest? Give your people a choice. Show them what they truly are beneath the fear and anger. Humans are capable of great darkness, yes, but also great light. Let them choose which they wish to be. The connection ended, leaving David staring at a blank screen. The Zephyrian's words echoed in his mind as he watched the countdown timer reach 6 minutes. Back on Earth, Chancellor Morrison finally made her decision. Admiral Torres, you are ordered to withdraw your fleet from Zephyrian space immediately. Operation Cleansing Fire is cancelled. Ma'am? Torres looked confused. Are you certain? I'm certain that I won't be remembered as the Chancellor who destroyed Earth to commit genocide, Morrison replied. All ships are to return to their home bases immediately. The relief on Torres's face was visible even across the light years. Understood, ma'am. Fleet is withdrawing. Morrison activated the emergency broadcast system. This is Chancellor Morrison speaking to all of humanity. Today we faced a choice between conquest and conscience. Thanks to the courage of Captain David Kane and his crew, we have chosen conscience. She paused, looking directly into the camera. The Zephyrian people will not be harmed. Humanity will seek peaceful coexistence with all intelligent species, and Project Ragnarok will be dismantled to ensure that no future leader can threaten genocide in our name. On the Ragnarok station, David's hand hovered over the abort key as he heard Morrison's announcement. Around him, his crew waited tensely for his decision. The weapon was fully charged now, capable of carrying out his threat with the touch of a button. Instead, David began the shutdown sequence. The massive weapon slowly powered down, its deadly energy dissipating harmlessly into space. He had won not through destruction, but by forcing humanity to confront what it was becoming. This is Captain Kane, he announced to the galaxy. The threat to Earth is ended. Project Ragnarok is offline. Humanity has chosen to be protectors rather than predators. As the weapon went dark, David felt the weight of what he had almost done. He had been willing to destroy his own homeworld to prevent genocide. It was a choice he prayed no one would ever have to make again. But for now, the galaxy was safe from humanity's darkest impulses, and that was enough. 6 months after the Ragnarok incident, the galaxy had changed in ways no one could have predicted. David Kane stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed diplomatic station orbiting the Zephyrian homeworld, watching human and alien ships work side by side to build something unprecedented. a truly cooperative interstellar civilization. The aftermath of his threat had shaken humanity to its core. Chancellor Morrison had been voted out of office within weeks, replaced by a coalition government committed to peaceful expansion. The military had been restructured under civilian oversight, and new protocols required approval from multiple species before any major military action could be authorized. But the most significant change had been in humanity itself. Captain Kane, the voice belonged to Dr. Elena Vasquez, the chief xenobiologist studying Zephyrian technology. Speaker Resonance of Truth is ready for the ceremony. David nodded and made his way to the station's central amphitheater, where representatives from dozens of species had gathered for an event that would have been unimaginable a year ago, the formal signing of the Galactic Cooperation Accord. The Zephyrians had surprised everyone by not only forgiving humanity's planned genocide, but actively working to bring other species into peaceful contact with human civilization. It turned out that the crystalline beings were part of a loose alliance of older civilizations that had been watching humanity's expansion with growing concern. We have seen many young species reach this crossroads, Resonance of Truth had explained during the first diplomatic meeting. Most choose the path of conquest and domination. They spread across the stars like a plague, consuming everything in their path until they either destroy themselves or are destroyed by those they threaten. But humans chose differently, another Zephyrian had added. When faced with the ultimate choice between power and compassion, your species chose compassion. That is remarkable. The ceremony began with Speaker Resonance of Truth taking the central podium, its crystalline form refracting the station's lights into beautiful patterns. Today marks not just the end of conflict but the beginning of cooperation. The human species has demonstrated that it can transcend its darker impulses when faced with the consequences of those impulses. David watched from the human delegation as representatives from the Alteran cloud dancers, the vegan hive minds, and dozens of other species added their signatures to the accord. Each species brought unique technologies and perspectives that would benefit all others. The Zephyrians' quantum crystals, the Alterans' weather control systems, the vegans' collective consciousness networks. But humanity's contribution was perhaps the most valuable of all. Humans, Resonance of Truth continued, have a unique gift among the species we have encountered. You possess an almost unlimited capacity for both creation and destruction. But more importantly, you can choose between them even in the most extreme circumstances. This makes you natural protectors of the weak and defenders of justice. When David's turn came to sign the accord, he felt the weight of history on his shoulders. He was no longer the frightened young captain who had threatened to destroy his own homeworld. The events on the Ragnarok station had changed him, just as they had changed all of humanity. I sign this not just as a representative of humanity, he said, but as someone who learned that sometimes the greatest strength comes from restraint, and the greatest victory comes from refusing to fight. After the ceremony, David found himself alone on the observation deck, staring out at the fleet of ships from dozens of different species. His father Marcus had been pardoned and was now serving as humanity's first ambassador to the Galactic Council. His grandfather Harrison was remembered not as a war hero, but as a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked ambition. Lieutenant Morgan joined him at the viewport. She had received her own command and was preparing to lead one of the new exploration fleets that would seek out other young species and offer them the chance to join the galactic community. Any regrets? She asked. David considered the question carefully. About stopping the genocide? None. About threatening to destroy Earth? Every day. But I think that's how it should be. The moment we become comfortable with using ultimate weapons is the moment we become the monsters we were trying to stop. They stood in companionable silence, watching human engineers work alongside Alteran artists to build a communications relay that would connect dozens of star systems. It was exactly the kind of cooperative project that would have been impossible under the old human supremacy doctrine. A soft chime indicated an incoming message. David's personal communicator displayed a transmission from Earth, from the new government's historical commission. Captain Kane, the message began, the commission has completed its investigation into the Ragnarok incident. While your actions were technically treasonous under the laws at the time, The Commission finds that you acted to prevent a far greater crime. You are hereby pardoned of all charges and offered the rank of Admiral in the new Galactic Defense Force." David smiled and deleted the message without responding. He had no interest in returning to the military hierarchy that had nearly led humanity down the path of genocide. Instead, he had accepted a position with the new Galactic Exploration Service, seeking out primitive civilizations and offering them peaceful contact with the galactic community. "Sarah," he said to Lieutenant Morgan, "what do you think humans will be remembered for 1,000 years from now?" She considered the question. "I think we'll be remembered as the species that had the power to become conquerors, but chose to become protectors instead. The species that stepped back from the brink of becoming monsters." David nodded. "I can live with that legacy." As he watched the sun set over the Zephyrian homeworld, David reflected on the chain of events that had brought them to this point. His grandfather had killed thousands in the name of human supremacy. His father had killed his own father to prevent genocide, and David had threatened to destroy everything to force humanity to choose its better nature. 3 generations, each forced to make an impossible choice. But in the end, they had chosen correctly. Humanity had proven that even the most violent species could evolve beyond their base instincts when faced with the consequences of those instincts. The galaxy was vast and full of wonders yet to be discovered. And for the first time in human history, they would explore it not as conquerors, but as partners in the greatest adventure of all, the quest to understand what it truly means to be civilized. In the end, that was humanity's greatest victory, not the conquest of the stars, but the conquest of their own darker nature, and it was a victory that would echo through the galaxy for generations to come.